Hey everyone, today we are taking a look at the brand new Black Series Jango Fett. It's pretty surreal to see a red box. It reminds me, of course, of the red box line, but don't be fooled. This is a brand new 2025 sculpt and a very highly anticipated one at that. We can see on the back here that this is number 10 in the Attack of the Clones line. With all of the redos we are getting lately, Han, Leia, Luke, Chewie, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Jango felt like a no-brainer. I think we're going to see Boba Fett from Empire Strikes Back next, just going through all of their top-selling characters and giving them a really nice refresh. And I have to say, this figure does feel really nice in hand. There are some issues here that I do have with it that we will address in just a little bit, and we of course will compare to some of the older figures. One of my biggest issues is the discrepancy in the lower body and the upper body. You can see that the shin armor, the thigh armor, and the knee pads, as well as the crotch piece, all have this like pearlescent cast silver plastic that just does not match the painted metal look on the torso and the gauntlets, which is accurate to the film. This is something that I am going to paint up at the end of the video, so stay tuned if you would like to see how that turns out, which is kind of a bummer because that is the same material that they used on the helmet, which is going to be a lot harder to paint. I don't think I'm even going to try because we've got those little black stripes that are just definitely beyond my skill level. The little dent on the top of the helmet seems to be canon accurate. The Hot Toys one has that as well, and you can see where the pearlescent paint kind of pools up and you get those weird black lines like on the side there. I do think that the helmet looks amazing and it fits really nicely on his head. It is a snug fit in order to keep the size correct, but on there this just looks great. I mean, this is Jango. Weirdly, in another review that I watched, it looked like the helmet was a little too big on the body, but then in person it felt almost like it was a little too small. But now watching this video back, it does look like it's a little big, so I think it really just depends on like where it's placed on your shelf, that sort of thing. But I do think that it's properly scaled, I should be clear. But you could really see the discrepancy on materials here between the cast helmet and the painted chest. And I think this was just a budget and production thing. Like, the chest plate is cast in that dark blue plastic and then the metal is painted, whereas the other pieces could have been cast in that silver material. And then we've got this issue here with, you could see I literally just ripped the tube as I was showing you this. This is not designed for these elbows to bend. I don't know if this was just an oversight in the design process or just something that they didn't care about. I think it was probably an oversight. Here you can see how I think it's supposed to work, where it kind of moves out of the way there and has a little bit of extra slack. But on that right arm, if you're going to be bending it, it will snap. I don't think there's any way around it. And even in one of the official promo photos, you can see on the left there that that tube is just sticking straight out from the elbow, like the prototype even snapped while they were photographing it. But with those issues aside, this absolutely has the presence of Jango Fett on the shelf. This figure looks so nice, and it definitely has something that the older figure lacked, which really just gives the feeling that this character is miniaturized on your shelf. And this version of Jango is particular to his appearance in the Geonosis arena. The jetpack on the older figure is the one that we see on Camino, and I think this is confirmed by the fact that we see the Geonosis arena on the box, so that is this particular appearance. I actually would have been okay with this Jango being a deluxe figure if it meant that we had the armor all painted consistently and both jetpacks included. I think that could have been a really nice way to like have just the ultimate definitive Jango. We can see that the head sculpt is a massive improvement here. It is quite shiny, which is typical of a lot of modern figures. Sometimes they don't hit it with that matte spray, and I mean, just the body sculpt here is just such an improvement. They're actually very similar in height. The new Jango looks so much smaller because he's just so much less bulky, but I think it looks a lot more like a real person. Like, just it scales so nicely with newer figures as well. And once we get those helmets on, we can really see how much better the newer figure is. This older helmet was just so tall and narrow and just ugly, and like, look how thick that rangefinder stem is. And we did have the SHF Jango for a while as well, but that was also a pretty disappointing figure. It's not terrible and probably better proportion than the original Black Series. Something about it just always felt off. His legs feel really long, the torso short, the helmet just feels a little wonky, like there's no way a human head could fit in there. And when comparing this face printing to even one of the more recent clone troopers, you can see how much better this new Jango is. And the new weapons are cast in that same pearlescent plastic, which looks okay. Definitely not ideal. I think painted silver would have looked better, and definitely compared to the older release, we are lacking some detail here on the grip. And the SH Figuarts was all in one color, but it did have those little black details on the barrel there. It's a little bit of a tight squeeze getting it into the holsters here, but they do fit in with a little bit of pressure. Covering articulation now, we have a nice past 90 degrees at the elbow, as long as you're okay with ripping those tubes. And then this chest plate actually does have some nice flex to it, so you can take advantage of those butterfly joints. Get the arms pretty high up if you're willing to kind of bend the shoulder pad just slightly. And we don't have the thigh cut here, which could have gone underneath that thigh armor, but this actually turns out really far. It's one of the better thigh swivels I've seen without that cut. I think they're kind of figuring that out because you can just cut deep into the back of the leg there and get a lot more range of motion there. So I don't know why I took so many figures in order to get a figure that can move that far. The knee pads are completely independent, and then we've got a nice bend at the knee, which depending on where you place that knee pad, you can get a little bit further. And if you own the original Jango Fett figure, you'll be happy to hear that the new feet are much better. They are stable and move exactly as you'd expect them to on a modern Black Series figure. And the jetpack does support the blast effects that we saw on the Return of the Jedi Boba Fett, as well as a few other figures, so in case you wanted to include those. This goes back to my whole deluxe figure idea that could have included these as well as the 2 jetpacks. And then we do have ball joints at the wrist that do give you a moderate amount of movement, but are going to be slightly restricted by the gauntlet, and that's just sort of due to the design of the character. And because of the glossiness, I did spray this with some Mr. Super Clear, so here's how the head looks with a little bit more of a matte finish. I think it's definitely an improvement, but we are not done improving the figure just yet, definitely not. So I designed and 3D printed this Camino landing platform diorama, but since this is kind of the Geonosis appearance for Jango Fett, I thought we should bring in some of my Geonosis files, all of which are available on my Patreon. So here is Count Dooku with a custom head by Nuno and a repainted body. This is the Super Battle Droid from the Black Series, straight out of the package. And here is that new Jango Fett, looking really nice, but we do have some custom heads I want to look at. The first one is by Fett Clone, and the combination of this head with this new updated body just makes this look like the Hot Toys version. It is so beautiful on the shelf. And then I also have the custom head by Nuno that includes the flight gear, which I think is really cool. It's such a unique look, and I really don't think a lot of people have this, so I kind of like having that as my version on the shelf. And here we see him with the Boba Fett that is also by Nuno, with a body that I painted, which is just the Omega figure. But since I'm crazy, we are not done customizing yet. So here is how the helmet looks under some different light, and you can really see the difference in the plastic on the chest versus the legs here. Really not happy with how that looks, so I'm gonna go ahead and attempt to fix this. And please leave a like on this video since I am potentially ruining my figure for your entertainment. So this satisfying material here is called liquid latex, and what it does is you can paint it on into certain areas and it dries over a few minutes, and then it peels off in one big clump. And so I am able to mask off this visor here, so I can maintain that gloss on the visor while spraying the rest of the helmet. I'm not going to try to paint it because there's just too much detail here that I don't want to deal with, but I do want to take down some of that shine, and I think it'll help make the helmet look a little bit more consistent with the rest of the body. So here's how it looks after it's been sprayed with the Mr. Super Clear, and now we can do the fun part of peeling off this latex. And I'm actually pretty happy with how this turned out. I wasn't too sure, but I think it's okay. And now I'm going to take some silver Vallejo paint and just really kind of lightly brush this on. I want to get a nice little base coat here that is pretty careful so I don't get any paint on the flight suit, but I kind of already did, so I'm just going to take a wet Q-tip and just kind of poke at that. Luckily, when the paint is fresh, you can get it off pretty easily. And you can see after a couple light coats that I tried to avoid any brush strokes how the left shin armor looks compared to the right. Now, I did initially try to separate the parts of this figure, but that belt is glued in the front and the back to the pelvis piece, and I didn't want to rip it, but I realized pretty quickly that this was a pretty risky and not the best way to do this, especially when I got near the thigh armor and was just trying to move the holster out of the way. I ended up getting a lot of paint on the holster, and it just was really not an ideal situation. So what I should have done was separate this at the knees like this, take those knee pads off, and then you can actually lift the holsters out of the way, which then allows you to paint the shin armor a little bit more cleanly. So this is after all of that trial and error. I did have to sand down the thigh armor a couple times and repaint it to try to get rid of those clumps of paint. The real right way to do this would have been to mask everything with tape and airbrush it, but I am fairly happy with the final results. Definitely an improvement from how it looked before, because even though it still has some imperfections and is not perfect, it still just looks a little bit more consistent on the shelf. So here is my version of the 2025 Black Series Jango Fett that will live on forever on my shelf. I'm really really happy with how this final product looks. I know I'm not really taking advantage of the articulation. This is how I had the old figure posed, but maybe I need to go in now and choose a new pose since we have so much more flexibility. If your eyes are darting all around and you want to know more about the figures on this shelf, check out the collection tours that are on my channel. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Please like this video if you have not already. I spent a lot of time on it. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.